up to Wisconsin today to talk about, among other things, I'm sure Luke Fickell's extension. So, Tom, the floor is yours.
It will get brought up. All right. Wisconsin in 2024 finished 5-7, 3-6 in the Big Ten. They opened 2-0 against Western Michigan and South Dakota. Then they played the Alabama Crimson Tide in week 3. Transfer quarterback Tyler Van Dyke from Miami gets injured on the opening drive. Wisconsin loses 42-10. Then they lose at USC 38-21 in their Big Ten opener in week 5. Quarterback Braden Locke plays okay. He's the starter. That's kind of the story of the entire season, unfortunately. Ripped off 3 straight Big Ten wins versus Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern, and then ended the season with 5 straight losses versus number 3 Penn State, at Iowa, versus number 1 Oregon, which was 16-13, a really narrow game that many people watching it live are like, Wisconsin has no business being in this game. Oregon played down. At Nebraska, lost 44-25, and then versus Minnesota, lost 24-7. 2023, to go all the way back, they were 7-6, 5-4 in the Big Ten, and a bowl win over number 13 LSU, as a matter of fact, to cap off the season. Luke Fickell is, I guess, on the key returns list for me, because I think it's maybe the biggest story going on with Wisconsin football right now. He is perfectly 13-13. Reminder, he started during the 2022 Guaranteed Rate Bowl. He has been extended to 2031 as of very recently. We've talked about it here on this show. He makes nearly $8 million per year. And at the end of every season, he has a meeting with the athletic director and the athletic department. And if he has performed in a satisfactory role, he is eligible for an extension. So I guess 5-7 was satisfactory. Incoming additions to this team: quarterback Billy Edwards Jr. from Maryland, a little banged up at the back end last season, but he can provide a spark. Wide receiver Mark Hamper from Idaho, big step up in competition, but there's a lot of buzz about him. Tight end Tanner Koziel from Ball State, 6'7" stud. Defensive end Mason Rager from Louisville. Defensive end Tyrese Fearby from Kentucky. You'll see an SEC trend here, Defensive lineman Parker Peterson from Tulane. Defensive lineman Michael Garner from Georgia. Defensive lineman JVR Suggs from LSU, and then quarterback Danny O'Neal from San Diego State, because of a bit of an exodus in the quarterback room. 7 out of 18 transfers are along the defensive line for Wisconsin. Key departures, and this is one I think is actually not getting enough love. Running back Tawee Walker off to Cincinnati. Tawee Walker was very, very solid for Wisconsin. Didn't crack 1,000 yards rushing last year, but Tawee Walker, in a system that was quote-unquote air raid, was pretty much the lone spark for this offense. It's been a very, very, very long time since I can remember a credible receiving threat coming out of Wisconsin. I mentioned him before. Cornerback Xavier Lucas goes to Miami in the transfer portal, but not really in the transfer portal, because he just dropped out of school and just went to Miami, which I thought was the funniest part of all of this college football nonsense. And I'm like, why do we have the NCAA anymore? It just doesn't mean anything. If the SEC means more, the NCAA means nothing. Quarterback Braden Locke, he's off to Arizona. Quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, for some reason, he's still playing football at SMU, apparently. Wide receiver Will Pauling was the number 2 receiver in terms of yardage last season. He is a part of the Fighting Irish. Wide receiver CJ Williams, he's off to Stanford. He was number 4 in receiving yards last year. Offensive tackle Jack Nelson off to the NFL. Offensive guard Joe Huber off to the NFL. And safety Hunter Waller, who was a stud for Wisconsin last year, is off to the National Football League. Recruiting. This was kind of an interesting story, and I want to get Cole's take on this a little bit later, is that you have some decent 4-stars coming in. Linebacker Mason Posa, inside offensive lineman Hardy Watts, edge Nicholas Clayton, defensive lineman Jalen Williams, and offensive tackle Logan Powell. 5 2025 recruits come from the state of Wisconsin. And the tradition and just the identity of Wisconsin football for so long is they're going to dominate their home state because they're just going to recruit those enormous offensive linemen and defensive linemen, and they're pretty much going to stay in their region. Well, this class that's coming in includes players from New Mexico, Massachusetts, Florida, Ohio, Virginia, Texas, Illinois, Arizona, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, North Carolina, and Minnesota. It's not uncommon for a team like Wisconsin in the Big Ten to be able to recruit out of state, but that far out of region is definitely an indicator, in my opinion. Okay, their schedule sucks this season, just like it did last season. This year, they're at Alabama on September 13th. This past year, they hosted Alabama. They're at Michigan on October 4th. They host Iowa on October 11th. They host Ohio State, the reigning national champions, on October 18th. They're at Oregon on October 25th. Like literally from mid-September to the end of October, it just sucks to be a Wisconsin Badgers fan. You're at Indiana on November 15th. You host Illinois on November 22nd, and then you're at Minnesota to finish the year on November 29th. Expectations. For me, I'm looking at 4-8. Schedule's brutal. October alone is murderer's row. There's a chance this team wins 2 non-cons versus Miami of Ohio and Middle Tennessee State, and then goes winless. I do see that as an unfortunate real-world possibility. Again, 4-8 is how I feel, but there's a chance they could peak at 6-6, and that's really the best case scenario. And honestly, for Luke Fickell, I feel like getting to 4-8 would be a real accomplishment. If he does 6-6, he's probably going to get extended to 2032 for whatever reason. There's a likelihood by the time this season ends, they'll have played 8 ranked teams. I mean, they have Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, and Indiana on their slate. And you can look at Illinois and Minnesota and Iowa as potential other teams to be ranked by the end of the season. For me, I was so confused watching this team last year because of Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator. He's now gone. In comes offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes, 30-plus years experience, has served as an offensive coordinator at BYU, Baylor, and Kansas. Broyles Award finalist in 2020 and 2021 at 2 different schools. I think that's an extremely impressive feat at BYU and Baylor back-to-back. Grimes' Kansas offense last year ranked 12th in the nation, over 200 yards rushing per game with a 5.5 average per carry. They were explosive through the air as well, ranking 7th in the NCAA, averaging 14.2 yards per completion. The Jayhawks averaged roughly 30 points per game and roughly 420 yards per game, while ranking 3rd in FBS on 3rd down, converting 51% of the time. So my big question, as I mentioned before, Tawee Walker is gone. Your new starting quarterback is probably Billy Edwards Jr. Phil Longo is out. So can we please put to bed the air raid at Wisconsin? And will Wisconsin get back to more traditional Wisconsin football, or is it going to be more of a modern explosiveness? And not to draw the direct correlation because of Kansas, but when you look at some of these numbers, you do feel a bit of a similarity between what Jeff Grimes did under Lance Leipold and what Andy Kotelnicki did under Lance Leipold. Will he be able to bring some sort of modern look to a Wisconsin offense? If that is the case, I'm looking at breakout players and running backs Darian Dupree and Cade Yakimelli. If this offense showcases the running game the way it was at Kansas and the way Kotelnicki did at Penn State, Dupree and Yakimelli could make people completely forget about Tawee Walker, because Dupree averaged about 4 yards per carry last year. Yakimelli averaged 8.3 yards per carry. My X factor is linebacker Christian Alliegro. This is a defense that no matter what, plays sound, plays disciplined. They're going to play you really tough. I'm very curious to see what their turnover on that side of the ball leads to this year. Alliegro was 1st in sacks, not saying a lot, had 3, but was 2nd in total tackles. Can he ramp up production? And now that you have this influx of defensive linemen in the transfer portal, and especially in this recruiting class, is that going to potentially free him up to be more disruptive in 2025? So yeah, this could be a really rough year for Wisconsin.
Rupp doesn't even begin to say it, in my opinion.
Yep.
I'm not gonna lie, Tom. It doesn't even begin to, like, I look at the quarterback position just to begin with. I like Billy Edwards. I think that it's a fine just for a 1-year rental. Danny O'Neal is the guy that I'm wondering, is he the one that Luke Fickell is kind of throwing all the eggs in the basket, or is he just a backup brought in because of you need to bring in somebody else with Braden Locke going off to Arizona? The schedule is brutal. We can just automatically start there. The other thing that you got to throw in is how much talent they have lost, in my opinion, on the defensive side, to where I'm not sure that they're going to be able to recoup. I also didn't like the Jeff Grimes hire. If I can be completely honest, I understand that you want to move off Phil Longo. I completely get that he was no longer the right OC to run the system, but I was uninspired by how quarterback play was last season out in Lawrence, Kansas, with a guy in Jalen Daniels who had shown you flashes. And also, remember that Jason Bean, who played for most of the 2023 season with Jalen Daniels, was in a very similar, was in a completely different system, and it was a wow factor. I worry about that. I worry about the scheduling. I worry about how their scheduling is with the breaks in between, with the bye weeks. But most importantly, I just feel like that in a year that you need to take that next step forward out in Madison, I don't know if you're going to. Just especially because of the hire that you made at OC.
Yeah, I agree with you. And honestly, I don't feel like there's a ton of pressure on Luke Fickell. And the fact that he got extended and 5-7 was good enough. Why would 4-8 or 6-6 be anything to be really upset about if you're in the Wisconsin athletic department? I just don't think there is a tremendous amount of pressure on him. Kind of like we were just saying before, there's pressure on LSU to win 10 games every single year. I just don't think that pressure is on Wisconsin football to deliver in a similar capacity. They're spending with Luke Fickell, and they're clearly spending in terms of going out and recruiting. Are they landing like 5 stars left and right? No, but they're clearly spreading out the map a lot more than they have traditionally. So I'm encouraged by that. Will it yield dividends? I don't think it's going to necessarily be this season. To your point, this schedule sucks, but maybe in 2026, 2027, you see some sort of progress, but who knows?
Does it feel like the extension was made because with the schedule in mind? Just like, hey, we don't want the conversations happening of like, is he on the hot seat? Like, he is our guy. We are bought into him for the future. We believe in what he's building. So we're going to go ahead and extend him now so you don't ask us about it next year when we suck and hope that 26 is better.
I do think it's that, TJ. I think it's weather the storm. And then it is an argument I think comes up a lot in terms of head coaches in college football is who else are you going to go get? And I think there are still people who believe in Luke Fickell. I think what he has done at Cincinnati and what he did briefly at Ohio State has given people enough faith to be like, hey, this guy has something. He should be able to turn it around. And we're competing in one of the 2 premier conferences in college football. So he's getting some resources to do this. But yeah, I mean, like if you were to have fired him after last season, it would have been pretty quick in the grand scheme of things. The extension, I don't think it made a whole lot of sense. And we've talked about that before in this show. So I don't necessarily think he's going to get fired if they have a bad season this year. And it is kind of like you could go get another guy, but you also look at what was going on with Paul Chryst and the involvement of the athletic department more so in terms of what was going on with that football team. All right, did he do that bad of a job? And maybe that's in the back of their heads. It's like, okay, like we maybe shouldn't have moved on from this guy. And now we're stuck with Luke Fickell. Not stuck, but like we're sticking with Luke Fickell. Who else are we going to, go get if we oust Fickell? It's
when they offered that extension, I think what it really was a sign of saying we could go 4-8 next year. We could go 6-6. We could go 8-4. He is bought in through 2026 because of that schedule just is so daunting. Mm-hmm. It is so problematic is not the right word because if nothing should be ever problematic for Wisconsin. But the fact that you haven't seen consistent progress and you've actually seen a little bit of regression, an extension to me just says, don't ask about his status going into 2026. He's locked in. We'll have this discussion after 2026.
Thanks for checking out this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're looking for more college football stuff, we've got it right here on College Football Addiction. Thanks for tuning in.